Now, I've reviewed Chinese bikes on the channel before, and about a year ago I made a video on the whole economic, political and moral debate. I won't be stirring that particular hornet's nest in this video, but TriumphalGarve have recently sought to broaden their appeal by offering 4 new brands: QJ Motor, Kove, Macbor and Vespa. I'm always in favour of a bit of diversity and greater choice for the consumer, and as they said I could come down and ride their entire range of brand new 2026 demo bikes, I thought I'd give it a go. Just to be clear, these are going to be very brief tests, the idea being to get an overall feel for the brand and the whole Chinese bike thing, rather than in-depth reviews of each individual model. So, in order of engine size, we have the QJ Motor ATR 125 scooter, Macbor Rockster 410, QJ Motor SRK 600, QJ Motor SRT 700X, Kove 800X Pro, and the QJ Motor SRT 900S. I'll cover them in that order, but feel free to skip ahead using the timestamps if you wish. At the end of each review, I'll give a quick mark out of 10. It's very subjective, not at all scientific. It's really just to indicate how much I personally enjoyed riding the bike on the day. So beginning with the QJ Motor ATR 125 scooter. First thing that strikes me is the inspired design, inspired by my ADV 350. In fact, park them nose to nose like this, and the ATR on the right looks for all the world like a smaller version of my Honda on the left. And it sort of is, half the power, half the size and half the price. Only space for one jet helmet here though, so not much good for the weekly shop. Although at the time of making this video, QJ Motor are offering the GV top case for free. Getting on and off requires a certain agility too, as the central tunnel is almost as high as the seat and not quite big enough to slide your foot through, so you have to lift it completely over the top. Sitting on it is just that. I think this is the most on bike that I've ever ridden. You're definitely not in the bike. You sit high, very high, with a commanding, almost imperious riding position, unusual for a scooter, although the small windscreen makes the rest of the bike seem scaled down, almost child-sized, at least for my 1.87 m or 6'2" frame. The engine is eager, aided by a micro-hybrid start-stop system designed to boost acceleration, but I was surprised to learn it was the full 15 horsepower allowed here on a 125 in Europe. It felt more like 11 or 12 horsepower. Now, I know that might sound a bit silly, but every horsepower counts at this level, and you can usually feel every one. Otherwise, comfort is excellent, both suspension and seat, better than the crashy suspension on my Honda, for example, and there's very little noise from the engine, something else that I appreciate after the racket that my ADV makes with its heavy CVT rollers. The QJ's brakes are also very effective. Single disc front and rear, works well, less wooden than is often the case on these entry-level bikes, which often make do with a drum on the back. Handling is predictably sharp, with great turning from the small wheels and short wheelbase. One criticism though is the dash. A colour TFT sounds nice on paper and in the showroom, but this one reflects badly in the sun, and it's so small that you can't read half the information displayed. This was a common theme on most of the bikes I tried during the day, actually. It's almost as if the engineers designed their screens on big 30-inch monitors in dimly lit studios, but forgot that everything is going to be shrunk down to 5 inches and used in bright sunlight. Fuel consumption is 2.2 litres per 100 kilometres, 130 mpg UK, 107 US. So, with the relatively generous 8-litre tank, you should be good for around 350 kilometres or 220 miles. Priced at €3,200 here in Portugal, including a 6-year warranty, the ATR is a tempting proposition. There's the bigger, more polished Honda Forza 125, but that's €5,500, I think, so that's pretty much out of the running, really. Then you've got the ubiquitous PCX at €3,500, so just €300 more than this QJ Motor. Now, I reviewed the Honda PCX a few weeks ago. Similar spec, but the brakes were wooden. It wasn't as comfortable and had less power, but It's a Honda, so it's the one everyone is probably going to buy anyway. Score for this little ATR, 6 out of 10, because it was comfortable and talky, but I felt perched up too high and the underseat storage is pretty limited. Next we have this bobber style Rockster 410 from Spanish distributor Macbor. 41 horsepower from its 397cc liquid cooled inline twin, so aimed I think primarily at A2 license riders. 17-inch front and rear upside down forks. As is often the case with bobbers, the suspension and seat are on the firm side. The engine makes a great noise under acceleration with its two big exhausts, and braking is strong with dual 320mm front discs and Brembo 4-piston calipers. Rear brake is 260mm, I think. At 185 kilos wet, the bike is relatively light, and its 735mm seat height makes it very accessible. That said, I found the riding position a bit strange. I'm not really used to feet forward bikes, but I have ridden them before. The issue I found with this was that the pegs seemed quite close. So although my legs were out in front of me, my knees were still quite bent, like they are when I put my feet out on the angled front running boards on my scooter. It's not really a problem in itself, but of course on this bike I also needed to be able to change gear with my left foot, and it wasn't the easiest thing to accomplish, especially as the gearbox isn't the smoothest. I found it very difficult to change down from, say, 4th to 3rd to 2nd when approaching a roundabout. Now it could be because the bike was brand new, but combined with the unusual foot position, I didn't find it the best. As you can see with the sun behind me, the dash is all but completely illegible. I couldn't even see my speed. Pity, because in less bright light it was one of the better screens, similar to Royal Enfield's latest offerings. Styling fuses character, classic cruiser cues, truncated fenders, high profile tyres with modern tech. In Portugal it's priced around €5,200. The similar Honda CMX 500 Rebel, for example, is 6,400. So, good points. Well, it's got a smooth tractable engine with a broad power band. It's fun and easy to rev with ample torque in the mid-range and a great exhaust note. Fuel consumption of around 4.2 litres per 100 kilometres, 67 UK, 56 US. So a range of around 330 kilometres or 200 miles from the 14-litre tank. Componentry is decent. You get upside down Marzocchi forks, twin Brembo brakes, and of course the good value for money, €1,200 less than the comparable Honda Rebel. But as I've mentioned, the limited suspension travel, I think there's only 70mm travel on the rear shocks, does give a very firm ride. Slightly cumbersome handling due to the geometry, feet forward, only basic electronics, you don't get any traction control or riding modes, and there are no rider assist features beyond standard ABS. The TFT dash is completely illegible in bright sunshine, and of course the styling prioritizes form over function, and a little wind protection and minimal storage. Score, I was going to give it 5, let's say 6, just because it makes a really nice noise and it was something different to what I normally ride. 6 out of 10. So on to the QJ Motor SRK 600. This is a middleweight sport street bike. I think they also do a full fairing RS version. Think mini Triumph Trident 554cc liquid cooled parallel twin, making 56 horsepower at 8,250 revs and 54 Newton meters of torque. An A2 restricted 48 horsepower version is also offered. Decent components again, fully adjustable upside down Marzocchi fork and rear monoshock, dual 320mm front discs with Brembo radial calipers and a 260mm rear disc. Dash is a 5-inch TFT color screen, and you even get tyre pressure monitoring and tyre temperature monitoring. It's extremely compact, too compact for me again, but otherwise comfort is decent. It is heavy for such a small bike though, 194 kilos fully fueled, and the engine does need revving to access what power there is. One slightly weird thing I noticed was that the bars seem very wide for a sports bike. Bar width isn't normally something I pay attention to or even notice, but these seem almost adventure bike wide. QJ prices it aggressively, very aggressively in fact, just under €5,000 in Portugal for the full power version. Which Honda would it be up against then? Well, the CB500R is over 50% more expensive, so that's out of the running. The Hornet 500 has less power, doesn't look as good, and uses much less sophisticated brake and suspension components, yet still manages to cost €2,000 more. How about the Triumph Trident 660? Well, it does look similar to this SRK. I really liked the Trident that I owned back in 2021. It's got a lot more power and more equipment, but it costs €8,500, 3.5 more than this, so not really in the same ballpark, is it? So the SRK, good. Generous performance and hardware. The Torquey Twin feels peppy and is paired with a nice to use 6-speed gearbox, very slick. Reasonable standard equipment, TFT display, USB A and C ports, LED lighting of course, traction control, TPMS again, and tyre temperature. They're all factory fit, but it's heavy for a 600cc, at about 195 kilos wet, so it does lack some of the agility of lighter rivals. Uses a cable throttle, no ride-by-wire here, so you only get 2 engine maps, normal and sport. There's no quick shifter or cruise control of course, and electronic aids are minimal beyond basic ABS and traction control. But at under 5k it is very aggressively priced in Portugal. It's more like 6,000 in other EU countries like France for example. So this does make it a bit of a steal in Portugal, and it's definitely the most appealing bike so far today, especially if you're a smaller rider. So 7 out of 10 because it offers so much bike for the money. Moving up now to the larger adventure tourer type bikes, beginning with the QJ Motor SRT 700X, which I believe is badged as the SX in other markets. These are the more all-terrain focus models with spoked rims, 19-inch front, 17-inch rear, and some markets like France also get a more road-focused model with alloy 17-inch rims front and rear and slightly less suspension travel. Very well priced again here in Portugal at just €7,500. It's about 8,250 I think in France, and it comes with plenty of standard equipment including metal side cases and a top box. Pretty good deal. Same price as the Honda NX 500 with its 48 horsepower and not much in the way of goodies. First problem though, this bike is heavy, properly Royal Enfield heavy, 243 kilos. That's nearly 50 kilos more than the Honda and even 15 kilos more than my bigger, more powerful Tiger 900. You're probably not going to believe this next anecdote, but I promise it is 100% true. I walked over to where the 700X was parked in front of Triumph's showroom to push it into a better position for some photos. When I tried to lift the bike into the vertical position, it didn't move at all. I literally looked down at the side stand because I thought João, the sales guy, was playing some sort of practical joke on me and had somehow bolted the foot down to the ground. As with most heavy bikes though, once you're on the move you don't really feel the weight, although of course it does hamper acceleration. This is adequate, but I certainly wouldn't call it brisk. Mrs. RM, my wife, weighs 50 kilos, so it's like having her on the back of a normal bike. The weight is all the more surprising insofar as this is actually quite a compact bike, built for smaller riders than me. But otherwise, the seat and suspension were very comfortable. Brembo brakes again on twin 320mm discs. They're very strong, which they need to be with all that weight. The TFT screen is nice and bright, but again the text is too small, meaning it's all but useless when you're riding. Biggest problem for me though, after the weight, was the engine noise. It's better than on the 900, which I'll come on to in a minute, but it's still very, how can I put this diplomatically, raw, mechanical. Some may like it, but in my opinion, it's way off the smooth rasp of a Triumph Triple, for example. So the good points are very complete kit for the price, hard luggage, heated seats and grips and crash bars, strong component spec, you get Brembo brakes, Marzocchi suspension, Metzeler tyres. It is exceptional value for money, but it's extremely heavy and the power, 70 horsepower, is modest by modern mid-sized adventure bike standards. Low speed fueling is acceptable, but the cable throttle and Euro-tuned engine can feel a bit blunted and hesitant, if not feathered gently. Only traction control is fitted, you don't get quick shifter or cruise, so electronic aids are minimal. Score, well, only 4 out of 10 I think, because of the weight. From one weight extreme to another, at around 190 kilos, this Kove 800X Pro is much more manageable. Very nicely finished, but pretty pared back in terms of equipment compared to, say, the SRT 700X. You don't even get handguards here. It looks like an alternative to the Tenere, but think of it more like a Transalp to ride, i.e. built for the road primarily. Gear change is noticeably smoother than on the QJ motors. The brakes are progressive, although the rear feels a little bit wooden. The seat has plenty of room and is comfortable enough, and the suspension is much higher quality than on the Honda Transalp, for example. You get a couple of rider modes. I found Eco nicer than Sport in terms of smoothness, and couldn't really feel much difference in terms of throttle response anyway. One thing I didn't like was the feel from the big 21-inch front wheel. Riding around roundabouts, for example, it felt incredibly heavy and reluctant to turn in. I mentioned this to Triumph, and they thought it could be the standard steering damper, possibly that or the head angle, but it wasn't very pleasant, and I'm used to a 21-inch front on my Tiger, so I don't think it's all down to inexperience on my part. It's quite expensive, this Kove, though, at 9,900 euros. That's only a few hundred less than the Transalp, which is more polished and better equipped. It's also nicer to ride. I think it looks better, and of course it will probably hold its value better. The Kove is an impressive 20 kilos lighter though, so if you do intend doing more off-roading, this could be for you. Good points then, well, it's very light and agile for a middleweight, as I've said. Strong performance, the 95 horsepower twin is responsive enough throughout the rev range, with a crisp, enjoyable exhaust note. Quality components like adjustable KYB suspension, big Brembo level brakes, Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR tyres, these all do give it a premium feel. The pared back approach will appeal to many, but low rev fueling is a bit rough. The throttle can feel fluffy under small openings. It also lacks modern extras. There's no quick shifter, no ride-by-wire, and therefore no cruise control. Some details are a bit basic, and the rear shock lets the side down after the KYB forks, giving it a firm ride. Finally, I saw in a couple of user groups that there are reports of an unsettled idling issue, which is currently being investigated by Kove, I believe. It does undercut the Transalp by a couple of €100 and the Tenere by a couple of thousand, but it's not as polished on the road as the Transalp, and I suspect, I didn't have time to try, not as good off-road as the Tenere. It's light and pleasant enough to ride, but I'm struggling to find a compelling argument as to why you would choose one of these. Kove, if you're listening, maybe you need to drop the price by €1,000 or so. So I'm only going to give it 6 out of 10. It's admirably light, but I don't think it's cheap enough compared to the more established competition, and you don't get that much standard tech. Final bike of the day then, the QJ Motor SRT 900S. Obvious competitor here, the Triumph Tiger 800 Sport. You get 95 horsepower and road-going wheels. There's also an SX version, I believe, with gold spoked rims and a 19-inch front for an extra €300 or so. Parked nose to nose to the Tiger, you can immediately see it's the larger bike. The Tiger looks very compact in comparison. Thing is, you pay for this size difference. The Tiger weighs just 214 kilos, a whopping 43 kilos less than this SRT. At nearly 250 kilos, the little SRT is in the same ballpark as the GS 1300, Tiger 1200 or KTM 1390. Except, of course, here we've only got 95 horsepower to play with. I'll come clean here and say that of all the bikes I tested today, this SRT 900S was the one I bonded with the least, so strap in if you own one. The gearbox is jerky, and I persistently kept getting false neutrals between second and third. The brakes felt pretty ordinary. Not to say wooden, the TFT screen is completely legible, the suspension is too firm for a sports tourer type bike, it's very difficult to haul it up onto the the centre stand, and perhaps worst of all, the engine is clattery and vibey, not to mention also quite slow. There are good points, of course. It's a big roomy bike. I had way more space to move around than with, say, the Tiger Sport 800. The seat is comfortable, which goes some way to offsetting the firm suspension, and there's plenty of equipment, including, I believe, an offer of free luggage at the moment. So, good points. Well, you get premium parts, Brembo brakes, Marzocchi suspension, full LED, TFT dash with navigation come as standard. It's adventure ready out of the box with all the hard luggage and crash bars fitted as standard. Relatively low seat height, 815 millimeters, and slim ergonomics make it accessible. And you also get a very big 24-litre tank, but it weighs far too much, 260 kilos wet, dulls the agility and the acceleration. It competes on power at the lower end of its class. So, I'm afraid another 4 out of 10 because it's well equipped, but the engine is clattery and it's just too heavy for only 90 horsepower and not actually that cheap. So some final thoughts after riding 6 of these bikes. There's no doubt that Chinese bikes offer good value for money, sometimes exceptional value for money, particularly here in Portugal, where they seem to be priced about 15 to 20% cheaper than in France, for example. Clearly the goal right now is to sell, sell, sell and build brand image. Nothing wrong with that, but should you jump on board? They are tempting on paper. They are tempting in the showroom. Low prices and usually, but not always, a ton of standard equipment that you often can't get even as an option with more established brands. I'm thinking here of tyre temperature display or rear proximity warning. But do you really want these? The proximity warning I tested on the QJ motor, for example, was flawed. More in a moment. In a nutshell, and in my humble opinion, Chinese bikes are fine in isolation, but when compared to BMWs, Hondas, Suzuki's, Triumphs, etc., they just aren't as polished. You see, it's the little things that you can't see in the showroom or on a website, but that I immediately pick up on as soon as I start riding. For example, jerky throttle response, clattery engine, illegible dash, excessive weight, slightly odd riding position, electronic aids that haven't been tested properly. The following anecdote will, I hope, illustrate my point. See, this SRT 900 has a proximity sensor at the back to let you know if another vehicle is getting too close. What exactly you're supposed to do with this information, I'm not sure, and I don't know, I thought that's what mirrors were for. But when you go round a roundabout and lean the bike over, the sensor picks up the proximity of the curb and interprets that as a car that's too close behind you. Result, you get an annoying beep all the way round the roundabout. Now that sort of sloppy engineering annoys me. They order a proximity sensor from AliExpress, bolt it onto the back of the bike and promote it on their website and in showrooms, but they don't bother testing it properly and it's a massive fail. And how will the electronics or the paintwork, for example, stand the test of time? Here in the Algarve, corrosion is less of a worry, but how about the cold, wet winters in the UK and Northern Europe? That said, even giants like Honda have been dropping the ball lately. Their ultra-competitively priced Hornet 1000, for example, looks great when new, but there have been issues with the matte paintwork on the SP. The seat is really uncomfortable, and in a user group just this morning, I saw this quick shifter that's come to bits. So, who are these Chinese bikes aimed at? Well, in my opinion, budget-focused commuters who want affordable daily transport, new riders seeking low financial risk if they drop or outgrow the bike, occasional leisure riders who clock low annual mileage, DIY owners happy to handle simple maintenance themselves, short-term users planning to upgrade within a few years. In a nutshell, Chinese bikes are, at least for the moment, transportational rather than aspirational. Let me know in the comments what you think, and as always, thanks for watching.